Hi folks, Seth Leapson here. Thanks for watching my monologue. In these uncertain times, you may be thinking about personal protection. If you are, I urge you to visit my friends at Guns Etc. They'll help you find the perfect protection for yourself and your family, and they can even teach you how to use it. They've been protecting Arizonans for over 33 years, and they stand for the great principles this country was founded upon. Or you can just click on gunsetc.com. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Welcome back, January 27th, 2021. Today is Holocaust Remembrance Day, and you'll hear invocations of the phrase, never again, a lot. The phrase is meaningless. The point behind it rendered moot by decades of cold shoulders and deaf ears to mass slaughter and imprisonment and violations of human rights where people have been targeted for their race, religion, ethnicity, and even thought or wrongthink. For years, to take but one example, we have spoken of the disappearance of people in the Xinjiang province in China, where corporations like Nike have done business, have profited off slave labor, have spent millions of dollars lobbying against sanctions in Washington, D.C., and have employed people like Colin Kaepernick to speak not against China's slave camps in current existence, but America's, or a part of America's, slavery that ended 155 years ago because more Americans, led by Abraham Lincoln, in their early and meaningful way, rose up to say, in their own way, never again. And so it never happened again in America, not that way, but it happens a lot in the rest of the world. It happened in Cambodia, it's happened in the Soviet Union, it's happened in the Sudan, it's happened in Iraq, it's happening in China. Here's the New York Times from November, 2 months ago. Nike and Coca-Cola are, quote, Nike and Coca-Cola are among the major companies and business groups lobbying Congress to weaken a bill that would ban imported goods made with forced labor in China's Xinjiang region, according to congressional staff members and other people familiar with the matter, as well as lobbying records that show vast spending on the legislation, close quote. You see, as the story goes on to report, quote, human rights groups and news reports have linked many multinational companies to suppliers there, documenting Uyghur workers in a factory in Qingdao that makes Nike shoes, close quote. Qingdao is in the Xinjiang province, the heart of darkness in China, where Uyghurs are disappeared and forced into slavery. Not 150 years ago, now, and for years. In a report published just last year out of Australia, a report titled Uyghurs for Sale, the opening states, quote, the Chinese government has facilitated the mass transfer of Uyghur and other ethnic minority citizens from the far west region of Xinjiang to factories across the country, close quote. The report goes on to say, quote, since 2017, more than 1 million Uyghurs and members of other Turkic Muslim minorities have disappeared into a vast network of re-education camps in the far west region of Xinjiang and what some experts call a systematic, remember that word, systematic government-led program of cultural genocide. Inside the camps, detainees are subjected to political indoctrination, forced to renounce their religion and culture, and reportedly subjected to torture. In the name of combating religious extremism, Chinese authorities have been actively remolding the Muslim population in the image of China's Han ethnic majority, close quote. Here's another quote. China is not our enemy. Come on, folks. They're not bad folks, close quote. That's Joe Biden. And you think never again means something meaningful? It doesn't. Slave labor, persecution, forced indoctrination, and conversion. Makes me think, you know who would give their eye teeth to be able to go to a football game in America and stand for the national anthem? These slave laborers in China who Kaepernick and Nike profit off of and try to sell us on and lecture us about how bad America is because part of it had slavery that ended 155 years ago. You see, it turns out the dictatorship of the proletariat is very rewarding to the actual dictators and profiteers off the revolution. Now, understandably, China does not have a 13th Amendment or a 14th Amendment or a First Amendment protecting speech and religious freedom or a Declaration of Independence that speaks of natural and human rights of freedom and equality. A Declaration of Independence Abraham Lincoln spoke of, saying, quote, "The assertion that all men are created equal was of no practical use in effecting our separation from Great Britain, and it was placed in the Declaration not for that, but for future use. Its authors meant it to be, and thank God it is, now proving itself a stumbling block to those who in after times might seek to turn a free people back into the hateful paths of despotism." They knew the proneness of prosperity to breed tyrants, and they meant when such should reappear in this fair land and commence their vocation, they should find left for them at least one hard nut to crack. Close quote. The tendency of prosperity to breed tyrants. Does $126 million sound like prosperous to you? That's the deal Colin Kaepernick inked and received from Nike to A, defend and promote Nike, and B, condemn and contemn America. So while China may not have what we have, it may be worth asking how much we honor and esteem what we have. They don't have a First Amendment or Declaration of Independence, as I said, things, if honored, that truly would spell the phrase never again into reality. But they do have a constitution in China. Yes, they do. Here's Article 1. Quote, "The People's Republic of China is a socialist state governed by a people's democratic dictatorship that is led by the working class and based on an alliance of workers and peasants. The socialist system is the fundamental system of the People's Republic of China. Leadership by the Communist Party of China is the defining feature of socialism with Chinese characteristics. It is prohibited for any organization or individual to damage this socialist system." Close quote. It also has a preamble, a very long one. But in it, you'll find this, quote, "The People's Democratic Dictatorship led by the working class and based on an alliance of workers and peasants, which in essence is a dictatorship of the proletariat, has been consolidated and developed." Close quote. So when you contrast our First Amendment, free speech, freedom of religion, and our Declaration of Independence, equality and liberty, with what China has, a guaranteed socialist state with the Communist Party as the defining feature of its socialist system, it troubles but has to be asked, what do we defer to here in America more just now? What do we practice and honor and elevate in America more? The great moral philosopher Hadley Arkus writes about his experience at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. He writes, quote, "As we walked through the museum, we took a turn, suddenly coming upon a scene encountered by many other visitors to the museum. A vast vat filled with shoes. They were the shoes of the victims, collected by the Nazis as they sought to extract anything they could use again or sell. And what came flashing back instantly at that moment when I saw the shoes were the searing lines of Justice John McClane in his dissenting opinion in the Dred Scott case. Quote, "You may think that the black man is merely chattel, but he bears the impress of his maker and is amenable to the laws of God and man, and he is destined to an endless existence." Close quote. He has, in other words, a soul which is imperishable. It will not decompose when his material existence comes to an end. The sufficient measure of things here is that the Nazis looked at their victims and thought the shoes were the real durables. Liberals are people of large natures with sensitivities cultivated to the most exacting liberal temper, Arkus writes, and so they are prepared to engage their sympathies for all species of hurts suffered by the mass of mankind. When the conversation turns, say, to a homeless man in the gutter, they are quick to insist that there is about that man, even in his diminished state, an irreducible human dignity. There is still about his life a certain sanctity that commands our concern. And we ask, sanctity, do they mean of the sacred? Does that not rather point to, well, you know who? We find ourselves in a curious situation in which so much of our language of politics and law is rooted in layers of moral understanding and religious persuasion, which have departed from the recognition of most of our people. My colleagues speak firmly of rights or injuries done to persons. They seem serenely unaware that their language here is grounded in understandings that they have professed at least to have rejected years ago. Even these academics would have to concede that they cannot possibly give the same account of the wrong of slavery or the wrong of the Holocaust that McLean was in a position to give. Some of these homeless characters living in the streets might have broken their own lives, and the victims of racism might be reduced and abased, and yet McLean could, through it all, and see beings who were made in the image of something higher. The modern liberal will proclaim his social sympathy and strike a militant posture in defense of rights, but he can no longer explain why that biped who conjugates verbs should be the bearer of rights. Thus we come yesterday to domestic policy advisor Susan Rice, who said this from the White House, quote, "The president has committed the whole of our government to advancing racial justice and equity for all Americans. I'm leading this effort out of the Domestic Policy Council. I've assembled a first-rate team to drive this agenda forward. We'll hold the federal government accountable for advancing equity for families across America. I have the support of every White House office and every agency in this work because, as President Biden has made clear, advancing equity is everybody's job." After talking about her own story as a racial minority, she then said, quote, "But for too many American families, systemic racism and inequality in our economy, laws, and institutions still put the American dream far out of reach. These are desperate times for so many Americans, and all Americans need urgent federal action to meet this moment," close quote. And so we have, as Hadley put it, the modern liberal who can strike a militant posture in defense of her own rights and successes, not able to explain why she has been granted.
Okay, right. You're this far away from the job. This far away from the job.
I'm right there.
Okay,
they said in this email.
Then what happened, Maggie?
So what happens is I see the document on
Why
his
did you see the
computer.
document?
Like Oprah Winfrey, like Colin Kaepernick, like so many other Americans, including me, have been seen by others to bear the impress of our Maker, and so be amenable to the laws of God and man, and destined to an endless existence. We have, in other words, a soul which is imperishable. It will not decompose when our material existence comes to an end. We are seen as human beings, nothing but human beings, entitled to the same rights as nothing but other human beings. The sufficient measure of things here is that the Nazis looked at their victims and thought that the shoes were the real durables. Remember that. Today, too many look at Americans and think that their race is the durable. If it is, we have systemic problems. Problems those who see race as durable keep reifying and impressing on us. To we who do not see skin color as the durables, but the human nature of our fellow citizens as the durable, we do not see a systemic problem. We see a systemic beauty. Let us continue to nurture that so we can truly someday live up to what has turned out indeed to be a great lie, the invocation of the phrase never again. To perpetuate the need to keep saying never again, just keep judging people not by their human nature, but by things like their race. After all, that was the hallmark of the book Mein Kampf and the regime we fought that gave us the need to say never again in the first place. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.